Thank you very much, Chris Rath and Rodney Smith, for our first provocation for the day. To introduce our second provocation, I'd like to introduce Stephen Frappell. Stephen is Clerk Assistant Procedure in the Legislative Council, having previously led the committee office since 2018, and prior to that having worked across a range of positions in the Council and the Australian Senate. Please join me in welcoming Stephen Frappell.
Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to say that I may have a solution to Rodney's dilemma. How do we manage the LC's numbers? And that's simply to replace the LC with artificial intelligence. The topic of our next session today. Democracy 3.0. How will AI drive our democratic future? It was my pleasure today to introduce Dr. Christopher Mayes, who's going to be leading the presentation. And then after we hear from Dr. Mayes, we are going to break and hear a video introducing developments in the Indian Parliament, in the Indian Upper House. So a little diversion from the usual processes of these sessions. But first, we will hear from Chris. Dr. Mayes is a senior lecturer in philosophy and co-convener of the Philosophy and History of Ideas Research Group at Deakin University. His research interests include political philosophy, history, and the philosophy of emerging technologies, together with bioethics. Chris is the author of The Biopolitics of Lifestyle, Foucault, Ethics and Healthy Choices, and also Unsettling Food Politics, Agriculture, Dispossession and Sovereignty in Australia. He also co-hosts Undisciplinary, a podcast that explores the history, ethics and politics of health. His work is supported by multiple National Health and Medical Research Council and Australia Research Council grants, including a current project on the ethics of AI and robotics in agriculture. So very interested to hear, Chris, your contribution on AI and the future of Parliament in New South Wales. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Christopher Mayes to the stage.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. It's exciting to be here with you, and I don't know whether I should make an apology for being a philosopher, but we tend to look at the trees perhaps rather than the forest. No, we look at the forest rather than the trees. So in terms of the details of a parliamentary system, I will not be getting into those, but I would be looking forward to your insights as to how what I have to say may apply in that context. So to start off, I will just explain this image to you. I'm not, as mentioned, I'm doing this project on the ethics of robotics and AI in agriculture. And this poor sheep is being subject to the prototype of a AI robot sheep shearing, developed through partly the CSIRO, but another organisation down in Geelong, whose name escapes me at the moment. The reason why I bring this up to start off with is that I think when we think about AI and we think about technologies, yes, there is a global context, but there is also a very specific spatial and place context. So in the 1960s, a grazier in southwest Western Australia, who was sick of dealing with shearers and shearers' unions in particular, thought a great way to get rid of them would be to develop a robotic sheep shearing system. Fortunately for the sheep, did not succeed, but this is an idea that is still around. So UTS has been recently trying to develop a robotic sheep shearer. So it's a kind of zombie idea that will never go away, but it has yet to prove successful. It's quite difficult to shear a sheep with a robot. But we're not talking about sheep today. I'm going to be talking about AI and democracy. And no doubt you have come across some of the concerns, or you intuitively have concerns about how AI may be a threat or undermining democracy. And here's just a few recent news stories. I had to change my slide as I was at Avalon Airport on the way up. The Saturday paper, front page, Dutton has hired these two wonder kids who ran a disinformation campaign during Morrison's re-election, and Dutton's hired the same team, and they are promising to use AI, and they've already used it in a number of other elections, to quickly generate memes, in their words, boomer memes, that are to incite particular emotional responses from segments of society and to cause some confusion and encourage, I guess, disinformation. Some people talk about it as sort of diluting the ecology of information. So there is this concern. The UN has also raised concerns about the effects of artificial intelligence on democracies. During the Trump re-election, there was a lot of news stories, and there are also local ones, you know, from the Canberra Times, democracy in danger, AI a threat to Aussie elections. But it's not just news stories. There are academics who are focused and concerned about this, and so these are some of the resources that I'll be drawing on in this presentation. Mark Koeckelberg's book, for instance, is a key one in political philosophy of why AI undermines democracy and what to do about it. And Ruha Benjamin, a sociologist of technology, I'll talk about her work a little bit more, and the way that these technologies, a concern is that they are going to perpetuate already existing systemic biases. And then a number of journals have been running special issues on will AI undermine and end democracy. So Ruha Benjamin, I think, is helpful to think about this in the way that she frames AI and technology in relation to our society. And she notes that in a lot of the media reporting, and whether that's in news media or in television shows, there is this sort of dichotomy of AI as being a saviour. You know, so there are some people who'll say, well, AI is going to be able to enable a direct democracy, for instance, where citizens are able to vote together and communicate together. You know, Al Gore, I think, talked about this as in the context of the internet in the early 90s, that this was going to be a new dawn of sort of democratic participation. But then others will talk about this as actually, this is going to be our end, our downfall. AI is the slayer. So Ruha Benjamin notes that AI and robotics is either part of a future utopia where societies are portrayed as peaceful, fair and ideal, or a dystopia. And we can think of this in a lot of popular media. So if you've seen the film I Am Mother, a recent one, or Blade Runner, or Gattaca, which is more about genetic engineering, but these are societies where a small elite who are in control of a technology oppress the majority. And this is a kind of fear that often comes up in these conversations. But Benjamin thinks that both these narratives, the slayer or the saviour, rest on this sort of false and unhelpful premise that we as a society are passive in this situation, that we have no power over how these technologies are going to be used, that AI is just going to be developed and there's a kind of inevitability to it being rolled out. This powerlessness in the face of technological advancement is sometimes called a sort of technological imperative or technological determinism. So there's nothing really that we can do about it. It is going to be used. Now, the idea of technological imperative is an important sort of sociology of technology phrase and idea, because it talks about the way that a technology is developed for a particular use. So sometimes you may have seen or heard of in theatre the idea of Chekhov's gun, that if a gun appears in a play, in Act 1, by the end of the play, the gun is going to go off. And similarly, we can see this with technology in this way that when it is designed and developed in that early developmental phase, there is an intended use for how this is going to be designed. So technologies aren't neutral things that, you know, we just design. Hammers are designed to hit nails, and it's in the using of the hammer that we sort of meet its use and its end. So another filmic example or cinematic example, if you've seen Oppenheimer, you know, towards the end, after he's built the bomb, he's sitting in the office with the generals and they're talking about what to do with it. And he's suggesting, oh, there could be alternate uses, or maybe we don't need to drop this bomb. But the actual development of this, from the start, the purpose of the development of a bomb is for a bomb to go off. So there is this concern about a technological determinism in developing these tools. We've got these tools, so we are going to use them. But Ruha Benjamin thinks that it doesn't have to be this way. So she develops this idea of us-topias, which she draws again from science fiction and the science fiction author Margaret Atwood, and says that while utopias are the stuff of dreams and dystopias are the stuff of nightmares, us-topias are what we create when we are wide awake. And it's being wide awake together that we create the future that we want. So Benjamin is using this idea to push back against a technological determinism and technological control by a few. So part of, I guess, what I'm interested in is how sort of deliberative forms of democracy and perhaps in local contexts can form small and larger coalitions to think about how technology is developed and how things like AI intersect with democracy, particularly to be able to wrest control of these technologies from big tech in particular and how they can be used for the social good. But is this itself a sort of utopic dream? Is this possible, and what mechanisms are in place to achieve this? So I'll come back to that in a moment. But first, I think, this was going to just be a series of what is questions. Philosophers like asking what is questions, but I'll try to limit to a few. So, what is AI anyway? What exactly are we talking about? So, broadly speaking, AI is an activity devoted to making machines intelligent. And intelligence in that quality that enables an entity to function appropriately and with foresight in its environment. Now, a few words are doing some heavy lifting in this definition, one of them being to function appropriately. So if we think about just any form of intelligence, human intelligence, what is appropriate sort of behaviour? Right now we're governed by a whole bunch of different social norms about what is and isn't appropriate in this particular context. How do we know these things? Partly, a lot of it is through socialisation. We just have gone to many different kinds of conferences and we know, we're supposed to sit in a particular way. Having presented a few times, I know that I'm supposed to do certain things. So there's a question of how do we learn what is appropriate? And then this idea of foresight and the particular environment. How do we gain the knowledge to act in these environments? And particularly then, if we're going to think about machines having this kind of intelligence, is a big question. So what is intelligence? So if we're going to think about artificial intelligence and reproducing intelligence, we may want to know what actual, intelligence is. I've already sort of mentioned a number of films. This is a documentary, Being in the World. I'd highly recommend it. It's very interesting. It's with a philosopher, Herbert Dreyfus, who's done a lot of work around phenomenology. Don't worry if you don't know about that word. But it's basically about skill acquisition. How do we come to know things? How do we come to be masters of something? So in that documentary, he's looking at chefs and musicians. We heard about sailing before. How do we come to know how to do particular activities in a masterful, a skillful way? So some of you may be, masterful at cooking and trying to explain, is that simple rule following? You follow a recipe, or does a master chef not rely on a cookbook, but just know how, certain ingredients are required? Or gardening. I like gardening. I would not dare say I'm a master gardener, but something that is a bane of any gardener's existence is weeding. I also have a young child and I suggested that they should weed the garden. But then trying to explain to them what's the difference between a weed that you want removed and a plant that you want to stay requires a certain level of skill and know-how. So coming back to sort of artificial intelligence, there is this desire for what some people talk about as a general artificial intelligence or artificial general intelligence, which is the kind of intelligence that we have. It's not domain specific, and I'll come to that in a moment. So it's not mere calculation. So a master chef, not at all referring to the television show, it's not about mere calculation. So one model that computer scientists and cognitive scientists have worked on in the past is that intelligence is calculation and that we just happen to do it at a much faster level. But what Herbert Dreyfus and other philosophers of intelligence talk about is that it's not just that we can calculate quickly And that when you master a task, in fact, you stop calculating. You have come to sort of embody a particular form of knowledge. And this can involve attunement to an environment, attunement to an emotional environment as well as a physical environment. And I'm going to try this button. Hopefully it doesn't. Oh, no, that goes backwards. There we go. Phronesis, good judgment or practical wisdom. This is something that Aristotle talked about. And so with the sailing example, Plato also talked about the role of a good governor or a good politician was like a sailor of a ship, that there are so many different things that are being interacted with that requires good judgment. You can't write it all in a rule book. You need to have experience that comes with it, common sense and know-how. So can machines do these things? Well, that's the desire, that's the hope. That's what that's the, I guess, the PR, the press, is all about this artificial general intelligence. This is going to be the Terminator, this is going to be the super smart robot that achieves consciousness. And I would say, you know, talk about being, I may be provocative for some audiences, that we're a long way off that we're not near there. But what we are dealing a lot with is narrow AI or domain-specific AI. So here I've got, you know, Google's predictive text for its search engine. Now that I've mastered this thing, I'm just going to keep using it. You know, so you start typing something in and Google's going to predict, based on both your own search history, but based on other people's search histories, will AI, and then so lots of people are concerned that it's going to take over the world. For the lawyers out there, I think your job's under threat, accountants as well. Glad to see philosophers aren't up there just yet. But this would be an example of narrow AI, so a very specific domain in which predictive text or algorithmic thinking is able to, you know, model a certain kind of intelligence. Similar with, you know, GPS and a whole bunch of different activities that we daily encounter. And so what Younger and other sort of philosophers working in this area and political scientists, they talk about the expectations of AI's supposed general ability to address tasks or form decisions across multiple domains, so that's this artificial general intelligence, are extrapolated from AI's very relative, sorry for the typo, success in data-driven completion of specific tasks in specific domains. That is a category error. So what they're talking about here as a category error is that we use narrow AI and we use it very successfully, and it's very competent and often very useful in our daily lives. But it's a category error to then suggest that from that narrow AI we can get to this artificial general intelligence. So today what I'm mainly interested in, and you know, there are a lot of applications for narrow AI in politics and democracy. So that's the sort of main thing that we'll be looking at. So some of the concerns that come up with artificial intelligence and democracy are, you know, this concern around disinformation and deep fakes, perpetuating inequalities and biases. So one of the things about, say, ChatGPT or any of these sorts of AIs that you may have been using or encountered with, as data scientists will say, you know, it's all as good as the source information that it's got, as the data sets that it's using. So if it's using junk data, you'll get junk output. And this raises a whole bunch of questions about where the data is coming from. A lot of it is just, you know, through the internet, scouring the internet. There will be more specific uses that would be interesting to have conversations about in this realm. Like, you could train an AI on all the Hansard that's been digitised, and you could have conversations with past parliamentarians, perhaps, if that's something you would enjoy doing. So it can perpetuate, if there's inequalities and biases in the data, then that's going to come out in the outputs. It's concerned that it could erode the integrity of democratic institutions, so particularly around things like elections, there's an anxiety about that. But again, I think it's important that we think about different contexts. So there's a lot of context about the integrity of US elections, but they don't have something like the Australian Electoral Commission or a sort of independent electoral body in the same way. So again, jurisdictional and domain specifics. Manipulation of publics, encouraging social division, information bubbles, digital astroturfing. So, you know, you may be familiar with the astroturfing idea of you're going to, suggest that, 150 people in this particular community are very concerned about a particular issue. You and your friends can write a bunch of letters to suggest that there are more people concerned about this than there actually are. Well, using AI, you could, write, a couple thousand letters probably in a day, if not more, and you could get them to generate them, make them all sound different. And so there's that change, some of the representational relationship. And then a big one, which I'm not going to be able to talk about really today, but I think is something that overshadows all of this conversation, is this asymmetrical power relations, particularly with big tech, particularly, the major companies like Metaverse and the way that they control globally so much of the technological and digital infrastructures. Now, there are some benefits, and we will be hearing, I think, in the video about some benefits as well that have been used, but one benefit is precision governance. So precision is a word that's often, so there's precision agriculture, precision medicine. Through these development of technologies, this idea that we can develop more precise and responsive, in this context, policies. So we could get more representative data. So in Taiwan, there are some really great examples of the use of different AI and digital technologies in Taiwan. One of which is the way that, we can do polling of people. We might be able to do poll a few thousand people, and you'll primarily get quantitative information. Yes, I like this thing. No, I don't like that thing. With some of these chatbots, AI chatbots, you can have qualitative conversations with publics and synthesize the results. So there could be a future where you could get 100,000 qualitative interviews with publics about what they think about, a gas plant coming in down the road. And the AI would then be able to thematize the different sorts of responses. So there is that possibility. And then, as I mentioned before, direct democracy implications. But there are other benefits. These are just a few. But what I want to suggest is that both the positive and negative uses of AI have the potential to undermine the epistemic conditions for democratic decision-making as we know it. And that's sort of my interest or concern here, is about how do we decide things and what knowledge do we need to make decisions, whether collectively or within particular democratic institutions. And I think that AI is changing the way that we will do that, because AI gives us both speed and scope and a new kind of knowledge. But is that knowledge, and this is the concern, is that knowledge sufficient kind of knowledge that is going to be produced by AI for democratic decision making? So again, I was going to do a what is democracy, but I'm sure we're all familiar enough with various types of democracy. But what I'm wanting to emphasise here, because a lot of the concern is around how this is going to affect elections in particular. And I think that to safeguard against the influences of AI, we need to think about democracy not in a thin conception, but a richer and deeper conception. So particularly I'm interested in things like deliberative democracy, as well as more radical agonistic forms of democracy. So we need to think of democracy as more than elections, more than representation, and more than majority rule. So the talk yesterday given by Dr. Phelps, I think, was a good example of the way democracy is being done through the crossbench and democratic decision-making that goes against this idea that maybe is popular of sort of majority rule, or this idea that there's a mandate from the party that was voted in. But that democracy continues after elections, and that publics, as well as other politicians, can be involved in the policy making and ruling after an election. So again, I think talking about our specific, as specific as a philosopher can be, democratic institutions are a key safeguard. So we've already heard both this morning and yesterday that there aren't ideal democracies, and that AI is coming into different democracies that are at different, have different weaknesses and different exposures. So in many respects, I don't think we should fixate so much on the AI question, but what is the status of our democracies, and what are the weak points of our democracies and the vulnerabilities of our democracies that we need to be mindful of. So one being, as the Australian Electoral Commissioner has talked about, maintaining an independent and strong electoral commission. And so there are concerns there around the information ecosystem, as Tom Rogers refers to it, and how this could affect things. Likewise, as I'm sure you've seen, the ABC Commissioner Kim Williams has been in the media lately in talking about the waters of misinformation and disinformation on the rise and the importance of a fully funded and properly funded public broadcaster for maintaining a sense of public communication that foments a common good. And finally, the other big one I would say is public education for democracy, the importance of that as a way for different publics to come together and different communities. So in arguably the segregated education system that we have between private and public, that in having a public education system that is adequately funded, that serves not only just sort of equal access, but that other people actually get to interact with each other. We've talked a little bit about the divide between the city and the rural and the regional, but also just within cities and within those communities, just the possibility to interact with somebody who may be coming from a different socioeconomic background, I think is a valuable democratic institution and process. So that's all just to say, I think democracy depends on and contributes to a common world. And one of the concerns with AI is that it is eroding the conditions of possibility for this common world, that there is this breaking off into these bubbles. And I'll change this slide in a minute. I'm not sure why it keeps on moving like that, but eventually we'll get to Australia maybe. AI, Australia might not exist according to this AI, may undermine the epistemic conditions for democratic decision making. So the things that we know, the things that are important for us to know collectively to make decisions. So why do AI systems concern us? I've already sort of outlined some of the things, but I would suggest that one of the sort of underlying things that makes me uncomfortable with automated systems, and whether we're talking about these bureaucratic systems or self-driving cars or robotic police and many other examples, is, noting that there can be other examples, is there's not a clear person who is making the decision. There's not a clear human who you can go to and appeal to the decision that's been made. So Space Odyssey 2001, the classic example of Dave appealing to Hal to open up the pod bay doors. And people who deal with government systems will often say that this is something the way, or university systems if you happen to be in that area, there's not a clear person to respond to. So nobody who is responsible for the decisions that govern our lives, nobody who's accountable, nobody who takes the blame when things go wrong, and nobody who has the authority to reverse a decision. So it's like when you get those emails, please do not reply, and they're the kinds of emails you really want to reply to. But so moving ahead, the rule of nobody is something that the political theorist Hannah Arendt described in the 1970s in talking about the origins of totalitarianism and the violence of bureaucracy. So this is well before this is just when AI was developing in MIT and different university labs. But she's saying, in a fully developed bureaucracy, there is nobody left with whom one can argue, to whom one can present grievances, on whom the pressures of power can be exerted. Bureaucracy is the form of government in which everybody is deprived of political freedom, of the power to act, for the rule by nobody is not no rule, and where all are equally powerless, we have a tyranny without a tyrant. So I think the concern here is, and I'm not going to show that sketch from Little Britain, but the computer says no is something that I think resonates with us because we've experienced in so many ways. So the concern is that AI, there won't be a person even there who says computer says no. There will be nobody there to argue with or to appeal to. There will be no person, there will be no one, yet we will be with a decision that dramatically affects our lives. And so for Arendt, this was a big problem around the deprivation of political freedom, the power to act. And this is somebody who knew that extreme deprivation of freedom, having escaped Nazi Germany. So in our time, 50 years later, after Arendt wrote these words, we are on the cusp, I think, of a lot of AI-driven bureaucracies. Are we going to be under the tyrannical rule of nobody, a tyranny without a tyrant, or are there ways that we can maintain our freedom and power to act? And I think, in some ways, we're not talking about the off-distance future, but things that have already happened. So a concern with AI is not that we'll be oppressed or hunted down by violent robots, or that even, I think, a techno-tyrant will overthrow our democracy using memes and deep fakes, but that it takes the rule of nobody several steps further, and then there really is no one who is accountable or responsible. And so, the recent Royal Commission into Robo-Debt, there were legal breaches that occurred, but to reach, 470,000 people required these automated systems. It enabled that. It created those conditions of possibility. And as Rick Morton said, somebody somewhere should have said something. But was there somebody in those systems? Yes, we know there were people who supposedly had authority over them, but then when people were receiving those calls, there wasn't a lot to do. And this is one of the recommendations coming out of the report, a reform of legislation in implementation regulation. It's a bit small there, but they're saying that about automated decision making, if it's implemented, there should be a clear path for the affected by decisions to seek review, and so on. I won't go into the details there, but that's one of the recommendations to come out of the report, that we can't have automated decision making without possibility for review. So what can we do? So philosophers and ethicists working around automation and military technologies talks about the importance of meaningful human control. So if we're going to have AI military systems, this is one of the things that they talk is crucial, that at many steps along the way, there is a human being who knows the process that has gone on. So it's not black box AI, which is AI where there's an unclear path as to how things, how decisions are made. But there's a human being who can understand actually how the AI reached its decision, and that there's a human being who takes responsibility for that decision. But other steps towards an ustopia, so I think looking to the example of Taiwan, and particularly Audrey Tang and their work, she was the first minister for digital affairs. We're talking about creating new portfolios. I think having a ministry for digital affairs would be a good step forward. But again, democracy is more than elections, and the concern with AI is more than voter manipulation. So things like democratising technological development and regulation, new deliberative institutions to oversee digital technologies. So one idea of that would be sort of mini publics made up of lay people as well as technical experts. Because I guess one fear is that we go into some form of technocracy, that it's only people who are computer scientists, perhaps, who know the ins and outs of AI. Yes, they should be part of the discussion, but we also want people who are lay members as well as politicians who are there with the phronesis, the practical wisdom of how we want to live our lives together. Interdisciplinary education, so particularly increasing digital literacy, formally as well as public. So within schools, but also public pedagogies. And so one thing they talk about is pre-bunking. If we know that deep fakes are coming, if we know that misinformation is coming, teaching publics about how to spot deep fakes if that's the concern. And then facilitating creation of a common world via communication. So it's not just about controlling AI, which I think a lot of the conversation is, even in universities, it's about policing the use of ChatGPT. It's not about control, but using them towards a common good. So one example is rewarding bridge building. So in some of the AI systems that they have in Taiwan, instead of people who say polemic things getting upvoted, it's people who say things that go towards the common good that are actually shared more widely. So I think just in finishing, and again thinking of some of the work that's come out of Taiwan around this, I think that this quote, "To those who live under tyranny, democracy is an ideal worth fighting for, yet democracy-born citizens who are used to its benefits sometimes barely acknowledge its existence." I think not being complacent with our democracy and our democratic institutions and the norms that govern them is a key thing that we need to be wary of and mindful, not just with AI, but a host of things. Thank you.
Chris, thank you very much for that thought-provoking discussion. I didn't see amongst the top 10 search results, will AI replace parliamentarians? But potentially we're a little way off that. But on behalf of the staff of the Legislative Council, if AI could perhaps start writing our 200-page committee reports or our minutes in the evening. That would certainly be a step forward from our point of view. It is a segue to our presentation online. Last month, the New South Wales Parliament was very pleased to host the 67th Commonwealth Parliamentary Conference here in Sydney, which brought together 700 MPs from across the Commonwealth. One of the participants who spoke at that conference, in fact at the annual Society of Clerks at the Table conference, which was a subset of the broader Commonwealth Parliamentary Conference, was Rajit Punhani, and he is the Secretary or Clerk of the Rajya Sabha, which is the upper house of the Indian National Parliament. Now, Rajit spoke to us about groundbreaking use of AI by the Indian Parliament, including in the instant translation of parliamentary proceedings into 8 national languages, which are used across India, and the broadcasting of those proceedings to a potential audience of up to 1.4 billion people in India in real time. So it seems to be a pretty cutting-edge example of the practical way in which AI can benefit the parliamentary environment, and it's being embraced at the moment in India and soon to be implemented as we understand it. So we have a 10-minute video presentation where Rajit outlined what's being done, and so we'll go to that before proceeding to questions. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rajit Punhani, and I'm Secretary of the Rajya Sabha, that is the upper house of the Parliament of India. So I'll start my presentation on the digital transformation of legislative processes. Thank you, David, for inviting me for this presentation. So we'll go and we'll travel along the journey of this digital transformation. So this is in very broad categories what we have done for the digital transformation initiatives. So we have the Digital Sansad project. Sansad in Hindi means parliament. So it is basically the digital parliament project, which we have divided into 2 phases. Phase 1 involves that earlier we had more than 16 different websites. So if any member or a member of the public wanted to go and see details of the parliament, they would have to go to 16 different websites. So we've integrated them and we've made it multilingual also. So now it's available in many, many languages. We have in India about 22 official languages besides many other languages. Phase 2, which is yet to begin, it will be focused on the development of software for the functioning of the House and mainly on verbatim reporting. Right now, like I think in most parliaments, when the member of parliament is speaking, we have reporters who note down what the member is speaking. But in due course, once this phase 2 we successfully complete, the AI will automatically transcribe whatever the person is speaking with 100% accuracy, and it will become like verbatim reporting. Then we have the digital transformation project, which includes member services, house operations, committee proceedings, communication to the ministries. So, for example, when there's a question raised by an honourable member of parliament, then the question is sent to the ministry, and the ministry, with the approval of the minister, replies to that question. So that also now is all online. So the moment the member asks the question, it will be transmitted online on a real-time basis to the ministry, and the ministry can then reply. And then we have the secretariat services, because there are a lot of us who are part of the secretariat and we service the functioning of the parliament. So there are many secretariat services, including our salaries, our travelling allowances and various other allowances, which also all are online. Under this project, we have also digitized all our old records. So far, over 4 million paper records have been digitized. So now they are accessible online. AI-based translation is in process. So as of date, we are now starting with 10 languages. 10 languages which are now translated manually by our translators, and the members in the House can listen to it through their headphones. That is also now relayed on our YouTube channel in 10 languages. And the aim is to do it in all the 22 official languages that we have in our schedule of our constitution. Then we have a video library project. So all the old videos, members of parliament, their speeches, their questions that they've asked, the minister who has replied, the presiding officers, all of them now have been recorded and they are accessible to the public in a video library. So this is just a screenshot of how it functions. So you have the member of parliament, he has a login ID, he has a password. If you're a guest user, then you also have a provision of an OTP. An OTP will go to your mobile phone. And another important thing is that if you have your mobile phone, you can also log in with the camera scanning your QR code. So these are the various parliament documents. I think most of you would be familiar with it. We have the daily business that includes presentation by the ministers of various reports. The standing committees or the various committees, they have prepared various reports which they also table on the floor of the House. And important thing is that we have AI-based language translation in 10 plus languages, as I had mentioned earlier. Besides that, we also have verbatim proceedings, as I had explained earlier, and whether it is by the member of parliament or it is by the secretariat, in terms of bulletins that are issued, are now all issued online and are available on the portal. So paperless is just the initial part. We have all our memorandum of business online, and you also have various search facilities and various AI to make the functioning of parliament more smooth. So each member of parliament now has on his table a particular tablet, and on that tablet, those documents which he has requested to see are all available on his tablet. And we have a dashboard. Also, he can see where all the other members of parliament are sitting, or if they want to make an intervention, even voting and even the marking of attendance we are doing through the tablets. One crucial part of this digital transformation is the capacity building and the familiarization of the honourable members of parliament, because they are the main users and they are the main stakeholders. So it is important that we have various workshops for the members as well as their staff, because a lot of the assistance is provided by the staff of the honourable member of parliament. So now all notices, whether it is for raising questions, whether it is a short duration discussion, whether it is a private member bill, all notices are now made through the portal online. Once submitted, the notices are again online processed by the secretariat, sent to the various divisions. The divisions give their inputs and feedback. It is then made available back onto the dashboard or onto the portal. So the member can access what are the inputs that have been received from the ministry or from the other divisions of the secretariat. So the software also has a advanced search function, so that if I want to know that in the last 20 years what has been said on school education, I just have to type the search words, and all the speeches, all the questions asked, all the replies of the minister will all be available to the member of parliament. Another important aspect is that after the introduction of this member portal and this e-notices provision, we have seen a quantum jump in the number of notices we have received. Earlier, there were problems in format. The person would have to, take a printout and give it to the secretariat. Now it is very, very easy. We have templates, and the member can easily access and fill in those templates. So notices received from the members of parliament have gone up more than double. Translation is one major project in itself. And this is being used not only by the secretariat and by the members, it is also being used by our parliament TV channel, Sansad TV, which relays live proceedings. So now even a member of the public who is sitting in some remote corner in eastern India can listen to the proceedings of the parliament in his own language. Up till now, we have all the previous debates, all the agenda files fed into the database. Currently, it is available in 10 languages, but the aim is to do it in 22 languages. And for this, now we need not rely on manual translation. We are developing a software which will automatically translate it into the diverse languages of India. These are just the steps in this project. So one is obviously the content generation. This would be debates, question answers. After that, it is fed into the AI platform. Then the AI platform converts it to the target language. Then the output is given. So as of now, we do not have 100% accuracy, but it is around 85%. So that is why we are not able to use it fully. So it is in more of a trial stage, but once the machine reaches 100% accuracy, then we will use it extensively. So what we do now is, because it's 85% accuracy, we get it manually vetted after that, and then this manually vetted content is then uploaded on our website, and this data is then fed back into the platform. The machine will only learn when the correct data is put back into the machine, so that next time it does not make the same mistakes and the accuracy increases. So this is our accuracy that has improved over the years. So we started in July 2023. We are hopefully going to touch 90% by the end of December, and hopefully by early next year we should achieve 100%. We've also now AI-powered retrieval of all audiovisual footage. So any video, suppose I want to listen to a video of the previous Prime Minister, I just have to search this thing, and the AI will take all his speeches that he has given date-wise and subject-wise. So far we have got almost 14,000 hours of AV content, audiovisual content, digitized, and it is now available on the video portal. And the journey ahead is that we'll be reaching 18,000 plus. Right now, whatever is currently going on in Parliament, we are automatically putting that footage onto our database. I think all of you also would be getting requests from members of Parliament that they want a recording of their speech or their bite that they have given on the floor of the House. So now it is very, very easy for us. We have it whenever a member of Parliament requests that I want the speech I had given in 2021 on school education, he himself can go to the portal and access it. So this is how it works. This is just a screenshot. So far we have uploaded 14,000 videos, and the target is that we will complete 18,000 videos very soon. So thank you very much. This is in brief our journey of digital transformation, and I am ready to answer any queries that you have or any clarification you may seek. So thank you very much and have a good day.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have probably 10 minutes available before we head off to morning tea. So can I invite any questions for Chris? As I think you're all familiar with the process, please wait for the mics to come to you if you've got a question from the floor, and of course welcome questions from online as well. I think we've got a question here.
Since the inclusion of Elon Musk into American government, he has started aggressively to attack democratic institutions and democracy worldwide, endorsing policies which undermine the whole democratic systems. Is inclusion of Musk into US government a start of aggressive attack via AI against whole democratic systems?
Thank you. I would say it would seem to be, yes. I mean, I wouldn't. I'm not a sort of. I'm an observer of US politics, so I don't have sort of any expert insight into that. But yeah, I think there's been historical precedents as well of sort of bringing in people like Musk into politics with this idea of private business is more efficient than government and social services. So I think that is part of this broader idea. I mean, I think in the whole, the other thing with AI, just in general, while I'm talking about this, there's a certain shininess and a certain smoothness and a certain greenness, if you like, or environmental sustainability. Things are up in the cloud, but the work of Kate Crawford does a lot of work on the way that it's just as dependent on fossil fuels as many other kinds of industries, just in thinking about the storage of all of this kind of information. So that's a sort of side point, but I do think that, to your point, that there is this sense that big tech will do things efficiently and smoothly, but big tech is also attached to the earth and mining, and physical storage space is required as well. So,
another question. There's a couple here.
I just want to thank you that nobody is responsible line. I mean, the robo-debt, despite the report, nobody is responsible. And the British legal system is unable to deal with the post office, the conviction and charging of post office managers for mistakes that the computer made. The computer made them criminals.
Yeah.
And it's been going on for, more than 10 years now. It seems that one of the problems that's coming out that then is our legal system's inability to deal with this problem of responsibility. Have you got any ideas on that?
Only just to add to it that yes, there are then. It would be good to have a legal scholar who's looking at this, because in a whole range of areas there are a lot of legal questions. Like even, I've got a colleague who's working on what's referred to as digital remains, and that's a legal minefield as well. Like who controls your, say, digital data after you die, your Facebook accounts, those sorts of things. Can your relative turn it into a chatbot if they so choose, or does someone have control over that? But yeah, I don't have an answer, I'm sorry, other than that, yes, there are a lot of legal questions around who's legally culpable for these decisions is just as much a minefield as who's morally culpable for them as well.
I think we had a question further at the back there and then down here.
Part of your central thesis is about, I guess, an existing dereliction of some informed, responsibilities when it comes to decision making, as well as, I guess, audit and oversight. I guess in our Australian jurisdiction particularly, where do you feel like we're most underserving our current responsibilities at the moment, in your opinion?
I mean, for me, and I guess it's sort of my opinion will be reflected by, I guess, my research interests and what I tend to focus on. I think the sort of public norms of things like trust and integrity is something that has been eroded for the past 30 to 40 years. So philosopher Raymond Gator has talked about this before, certainly not unique in making this comment about the way that, coming to, say, taking responsibility and ownership of decisions like robo-debt. But, we've had misinformation. So, we've had misinformation and disinformation in our political system since Federation, and that AI just presents a new opportunity for doing that. And so I think if we are able to sort of change the nature of public discourse and expectations about people to take responsibility and to speak truthfully, then that will go some way to shifting that. It's not going to solve all of these problems, but...
On that, it's a classic refrain, but it kind of goes contrary to, I guess, some ideas some people have about free speech, and I guess who should be the ultimate arbiter when it comes to truthfulness and fact finding and whatnot. So, do you have an opinion there about who's best placed or how that responsibility should be delegated? Yeah.
So again, in talking about, I guess, the norms of truthfulness and integrity and taking responsibility. It's not about curtailing people's speech, but I guess making them have consequences for false speech. So you can say, to use a old example, but no doubt still potentially controversial, there should be consequences for pushing a line of children being thrown overboard. But there wasn't. And I think we live in a society where those sorts of things can just continue to perpetuate. Or a consequence for saying that migrants are eating their cats and dogs. There isn't, that's obviously not an example from Australia, but that's, we are in a situation where lack of truthfulness isn't met with any kind of significant consequences.
Half question.
Sure,
How do we
do have other
hold
people.
foreign international players accountable when a lot of this, I guess, sources of misinformation are coming from overseas to a certain degree?
I wouldn't say that. No, we have plenty of our own misinformation and disinformation coming from within Australia. So I think we should start with that before worrying too much about overseas.
I'm being given the wind up. We've got one question down here, I know, and a lady at the back is also. Do we have two very, very quick questions, or else I will get in trouble?
Thanks, Chris. disinformation's one problem, but information is also potentially a problem. I remember all that discourse a few years back, which you hear less of now, about focus group-driven government, poll-driven government, which can be accurate information, but in the absence of moral leadership and political creativity, can actually lead to bad government. I wonder if what you've discussed today is in some ways also a continuation of that set of problems of this, and it does bear on that notion of no one being in charge, really, in a way. It's the polls, it's the focus groups that are kind of driving things, not political leadership, not deliberation.
Definitely. All that that's exactly sort of what I was with concern around the sort of positive uses of AI. Yeah, I think we could end up in a future of just everything being, data-driven, precision, deliberative through these AI systems, but no political leadership. And so, if you're in a context where the White Australia policy is accepted by everybody, you've got no one who's going to sort of take your leadership out of that, because the polling will just reflect what the population thinks, and sometimes the population is very wrong.
One very quick question from the back.
Very quick. So Dr. Maisie talks about that rule of nobody and how AI can lead to people becoming powerless. And you've written about biopolitics before. I'm wondering if you're familiar with the work of Byung-Chul Han on psychopolitics, and how he's talked about social media and AI becoming this way that people get so much freedom that in the end they're stripped of that power. It's just this facade of power that they have. I'm wondering if you think, or the consequences you think that'll have on democracy, that excess of freedom and consequent loss of power.
No, I haven't heard of that concept, but so I'll be interested to follow that up with you. But yeah, I do think there are similar dynamics, I guess. Yeah, the idea that you can just scream into the void, so to speak, or write 100 Facebook posts to your friends expressing how frustrated you are, but maybe you should write a letter to your politician, get out there in a demonstration, or go towards some kind of community, local activism, or many other opportunities for action. But yeah, that provides that easy outlet and maybe a bit of a dopamine hit too.
Ladies and gentlemen, morning tea awaits. It's morning. David is going to say a few words. Can I ask you all to thank Dr. Christopher Mays in the usual way?